Learn English through story. The shadows we carry. In the small, isolated village of Kestern, nestled deep within the forests of the northern mountains, there was a tradition that had been upheld for generations. Each year, on the eve of the winter solstice, the villagers would gather in the central square to light a great bonfire and share stories. The flames would dance high into the night, warding off the encroaching darkness and symbolizing the villagers' shared resilience in the face of the harsh winter. Among the villagers was a man named Roderick. He was a quiet, solitary figure, known more for his skill with a bow and his ability to navigate the dense forests than for his willingness to socialize. Roderick was a hunter by trade, providing much of the village's meat during the long, cold months when the crops could not grow. He lived alone on the edge of the village, in a small, weather-beaten cabin that had once belonged to his parents. Roderick's parents had died when he was young, leaving him to fend for himself. The villagers had offered to help, but he had refused their charity, choosing instead to rely on his own strength and skills. Over time, he had become known as something of a loner, respected for his abilities but distant from the warmth of village life. As the years passed, Roderick's solitude deepened. He spent most of his time in the forest, tracking game and living off the land. The villagers rarely saw him, except when he came into the square to trade his furs and meat for supplies. He spoke little and interacted even less, preferring the company of the trees and the animals to that of his fellow humans. But despite his self-imposed isolation, Roderick was not immune to the loneliness that sometimes crept into his heart. There were nights when the silence of his cabin felt oppressive, and the weight of his solitude pressed down on him like a heavy cloak. Yet, he could not bring himself to reach out to the villagers, to join in their laughter and stories around the bonfire. He had convinced himself that he was better off alone, that he needed no one and nothing beyond the forest and his own company. One cold winter night, as Roderick was preparing for bed, he heard a soft knock on his door. Startled as he rarely had visitors, so he opened it to find a young woman standing on his doorstep. She was shivering from the cold, her cloak pulled tightly around her slender frame, and her eyes were wide with fear. "Please," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm lost. I've been wandering in the forest for hours. Can you help me?" Roderick hesitated. He was not used to having company, and the idea of letting this stranger into his home made him uneasy. But he could see that she was cold and frightened, and something in her eyes, something vulnerably, stirred a long-buried sense of compassion within him. "Come in," he said gruffly, stepping aside to let her enter. The woman thanked him and stepped inside, her body visibly relaxing in the warmth of the cabin. Roderick stoked the fire and offered her a blanket, which she accepted gratefully. As she warmed herself by the fire, Roderick asked her how she had come to be lost in the forest. "I was traveling to visit family in a nearby village," she explained, her voice still shaky. "But the path was unfamiliar, and I lost my way. The snow started falling, and I couldn't find my way back. I was so scared that I would freeze to death out there." Roderick listened silently, his expression unreadable. He could see that she was still frightened, though she was trying to mask it. He offered her some of the stew he had been cooking, and she accepted, eating hungrily. As she ate, she introduced herself as Leela, and Roderick learned that she was not much younger than he was, though her life had been very different. She spoke of her family with affection, and of the bustling village where she lived, far to the south, where winters were milder, and the people were warm and welcoming. As she talked, Roderick found himself drawn to her words, to the warmth in her voice that contrasted so sharply with the cold, lonely existence he had known for so long. He realized, with a pang of regret, that he had forgotten what it was like to have someone to talk to, someone to share even the simplest of moments with. The night wore on, and as the storm outside intensified, it became clear that Leila would not be able to continue her journey until morning. Roderick offered her a place to sleep by the fire, and she accepted gratefully, settling down on the makeshift bed he had prepared for her. As Leila slept, Roderick sat in his chair by the fire, staring into the flames. He could not sleep, his mind too restless with thoughts and emotions he had long suppressed. He thought of his parents, of the loneliness that had become his constant companion since their deaths, and of the choice he had made to distance himself from the village and its people. He had told himself that he was strong, that he did not need anyone. But now, with Leila sleeping peacefully by the fire, he could not help but wonder if he had been wrong. The storm raged on through the night, and as dawn broke, the snow had piled high against the door of the cabin. Leila woke to find Roderick still sitting by the fire, looking weary but thoughtful. She thanked him again for his kindness, and as they shared a simple breakfast, she spoke of her plans to continue her journey once the storm cleared. Roderick found himself reluctant to see her go. For the first time in years, he had experienced a sense of connection, a glimpse of the warmth and companionship that he had been missing. He wanted to ask her to stay, to spend more time with him, but the words caught in his throat. He had spent so long building walls around his heart that he did not know how to lower them. As Leila prepared to leave, Roderick finally found the courage to speak. "Leila," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Before you go, I want to thank you." Leila looked at him, surprised. "Thank me? For what?" "For reminding me that there's more to life than just surviving," he said, his eyes downcast. "I've spent so many years alone, convincing myself that I didn't need anyone. But your presence here, even for just one night, has shown me how wrong I was." Leila smiled, a warm, understanding smile that made Roderick's heart ache. "You don't have to be alone, Roderick," she said gently. "There's a whole village out there, full of people who care about you. They've always cared, even if you didn't see it. All you have to do is reach out." Roderick nodded slowly, her words sinking in. He had been so focused on his self-imposed isolation that he had blinded himself to the possibility of connection, of belonging. But now, he saw that he had a choice to step out of the shadows of his past and embrace the light of community. As Leila left, Roderick watched her go, feeling a strange mix of sadness and hope. The cabin felt emptier than ever without her, but her words lingered in his mind, giving him the strength to do what he had been too afraid to do for so long. That evening, as the villagers gathered in the square for the winter solstice celebration, they were surprised to see Roderick among them. He stood at the edge of the crowd, hesitant and uncertain, but determined to take that first step. The villagers greeted him warmly, some clapping him on the back, others offering him a drink. They asked him to join them by the fire, to share in the stories and laughter that he had long avoided. As the night wore on, Roderick found himself slowly opening up, sharing stories of his hunts, of the forest, and even of his parents. The villagers listened with interest, and for the first time in years, Roderick felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the people around him. The bonfire burned brightly, casting its warm glow on the faces of the villagers. Roderick looked around at the people who had welcomed him so easily, despite his years of solitude, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had spent so long chasing shadows, trying to fill the void in his heart with isolation and self-reliance. But now, he understood that true strength came not from standing alone, but from allowing others in. As the night drew to a close and the villagers began to drift back to their homes, Roderick stood by the fire, feeling lighter than he had in years. He had taken the first step towards healing, towards breaking free from the loneliness that had held him captive for so long. And as he watched the last of the flames flicker and die, he knew that he would never again let the shadows of his past keep him from embracing the light of the present. For in that light, he had found something far more valuable than survival. He had found the warmth of human connection, the joy of shared moments, and the strength that comes from being part of a community. And with that, Roderick knew that he had finally come home. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.